be recorded. And then we have a sign-in sheet that James will post a link in the comment field where you can click on that link and add your name and contact information so that you will receive any future information regarding this issue and this area. So I invite you to click on that link and go ahead and add your contact information so that we can get a hold of you if we need to. So with that, on the agenda today, we are going to have a presentation from Lucy Jordan. She's with the Utah Geological Survey, and it was a study that they completed regarding groundwater in Ogden Valley. They have done a phenomenal job with the study, and I congratulate them on, they even won an award on it. So she's going to share a lot of data that they pulled together for you guys. And then after Lucy is done, you'll hear about the current water right policy that we have from Eric Jones, the regional engineer. And then we're here to take questions from you and comments. So with that introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Lucy.
All right, thank you, Teresa, for that, and welcome to everybody. I'm excited to be able to share with you what the Utah Geological Survey has learned with this recent study that we just completed. It was a pretty comprehensive study, and I had a lot of help on this. And so let's get into the presentation. Let's see, let me share this one. All right, should be coming up. Can you all see that? Yes, okay, great. Okay, so yeah, I want to go over briefly. Like I said, it was a pretty comprehensive report, so I don't have a lot of time to get into the weeds of this report, but it is available on our website, and you can buy a copy. So if there's anything else you would like to dive into more, maybe we can have questions afterwards, or you can always reach out to me. But let's just go over some of the highlights of this recent study that we did. I have a couple of my co-authors are here on the call with us. Hugh Hurlow is our program director, and then Paul Inkenbrandt, who did much of the water budget work, is on the call with us as well. So let's go ahead, let's just define where we are talking about. So our study area, of course, is the watershed for Ogden Valley. So basically everything up from Pineview Dam and up to the ridge line. Also shown on this slide is a brown squiggly line in the center of the valley, and that is the outline of the valley fill sediments, and so that's where our valley fill principal aquifer is going to be. This is part of the Ogden River drainage, and the last comprehensive study on this valley was done by the U.S. Geological Survey in 1985. There have been other studies on different parts of the valley since then, but they did a similar study to this. So we've got some updated numbers for the Division of Water Rights and water quality information to share with you. So what we're going to talk about today is the groundwater system. So we're going to talk about what the aquifers are comprised of and where they are. Then I'm going to go over groundwater flow, where we think it's flowing. And then a big part of the study was to help understand the amount of connectedness between the groundwater system and the surface water system. And then also, where does the water in the valley fill aquifer come from? Is it from surface water? Is it from bedrock? And so we did a bunch of work on trying to understand where those come from. We'll also talk about the water budget, and those are the different components of recharge and discharge. And overall, in that valley fill system, we have concluded there's about 67,000 acre feet per year. And then we'll talk a bit about chemistry, and specifically the nitrate distribution, and what would happen if we continue to develop in Ogden Valley using septic tank wastewater disposal systems. All right, so first of all, kind of the nuts and bolts of the geology and the hydrogeology of the system. You'll see this slide several times because it's a good schematic to show how we envision the aquifer system. So surrounding, let's see, I'm going to put up a pointer here. Can you see the pointer on that? No? Okay, can you see it now? Okay, all right, I got to go to this screen. All right, so we've got mountains surrounding the valley fill. They're shown in brown there. And then we have kind of on top of that bedrock, but underneath all of our valley fill sediments, we have this pink unit. And that is a unit when the valley was being created by the faulting on both sides of the valley, there were some volcanoes that were spewing ash and debris into the air, and that falls down and becomes this unit that I've drawn in pink here. It's a tuff unit, and it's not a great aquifer. There are some wells in it, but we think that that's kind of an inhibitor for groundwater flow, so it becomes important in this aquifer system. So we think that underlies a good portion of the valley. And above that, we've got a pretty thick package, especially in the center of the valley, of sand, gravel, some clay units in there, some silt units, but not super continuous silt and clay units. And so that becomes the bulk of the principal aquifer. So we've shown it all the way up to the mountains and then continuing down all the way to the mouth of the canyon. Overlying that is this confining unit that's drawn in this kind of gold color. And that is a really important player in the groundwater system, because water that comes in from the mountain block or that falls on the valley fill outside of where this confining unit is, it can get into the aquifer. It can infiltrate down through there. It can come out of the streams. Water can recharge that unconfined part of the principal aquifer. But once the groundwater flows toward that confining unit, it hits the edge of that confining unit, it has to split. And so it either goes into that principal confined aquifer, which is this lower section, or it goes on top of that confining unit and becomes part of the shallow unconfined aquifer. And that shallow unconfined aquifer then feeds directly into Pineview Reservoir. So it's touching Pineview Reservoir. Okay, so geologically speaking, what we did is categorize the different geologic units into good aquifers, shown in blue, bad aquifers, shown in pink and maroon, ones that want to inhibit groundwater flow, or some that we've kind of grouped into this heterogeneous units that may have some rocks that transmit water pretty well, but they might be surrounded by some shales or something that's not going to transmit as well. So we kind of just mapped out the watershed according to those three units. And you can see that the South Fork drainage basin has a lot of blue at the surface. That's the Wasatch Formation, which is a kind of a cobbly unit. And we think that that's probably pretty amenable and receptive to precipitation that lands on it and infiltrates. So it can get into the bedrock. And then another area that has some karst or some carbonates at the surface is up here in the mountains northeast of Eden and Liberty, and there's carbonate units there, and it's kind of flat, and so that's another area that recharge can get in, and it's a good aquifers. The valley fill aquifer is shown in yellow, and then the position of that confining unit that I was just talking about is shown in pink. So it's not at the surface, but it is underlying a pretty good portion of the center of the valley. Let's see. All right, so let's talk about water levels a little bit. So hydrogeologists, this is one of our most important tools, is a potentiometric surface map. And we make these throughout time. So there was one made back in 1985. There's probably been a couple since then. There was even some before that. So we updated the water level map with 60 water level measurements that we made in wells in April and May of 2016. And we contour those. So you take the elevation of that water level surface in the well, and then you just contour it. And it makes lines. These equal lines are lines of equal potential, so equal water level. And so basically it's like a topo map for the water surface. And like water on the surface, it runs downhill. When you have if you're looking at a topo map, you can kind of figure out where the water is going to run. It's the same thing with the potentiometric surface. So water is going to flow downhill, which is perpendicular to the lines that you see, these circular lines that you see on the screen. And so I have a little, oh, I should also say that we've updated the previous water level maps that we had. We're not using pumping levels from the Ogden City well field. So Ogden City well field is right on the peninsula there, that northern peninsula of Pineview Reservoir. And they have 6 wells, and they pump about 10 to 12,000 acre feet per year. And so that's why this map has these circles surrounding that well fields, because that is essentially the endpoint for groundwater flow coming from around the rest of the valley fill aquifer. So the contours close in around that well, and that makes a cone of depression around that well. And this map has been updated using pumping levels, and I did that specifically because those wells are pumping almost all year, every year. And so that is basically the surface of the groundwater system as it shows, the static groundwater system. All right, so I've got a little animation to show groundwater flow. Like I said, again, groundwater flows perpendicular to the potentiometric surface lines. So basically, you've got groundwater flowing in from all corners of the valley fill aquifer, going into the confined aquifer, and ending up going to Ogden City well field. All right. So once again, just kind of looking at this schematic. So you'd have groundwater flowing in from the sides of the valley, and then it either has to go up on top of that shallow unconfined aquifer, or it goes into the principal aquifer. And here I've drawn the Ogden City well field, so it would be going toward that Ogden City well field. All right, depth to water is interesting to a lot of people because you want to drill a well. And so here's our little depth to water map. The shallowest areas, the areas that have the shallowest depth to water are shown here in this kind of yellow tan color and the really light green color. So anything in this yellow or light green is less than 15 feet to water. And you'll notice that alongside the rivers, the water table is pretty shallow, and we'll get into that a little bit more later. But just, this is a nice map if you want to know if I drill a base, or if I dig a basement, am I going to find water in my basement? And it shows that this is a pretty shallow system over much of the valley. All right, let's look at water level trends. This is another tool we use to kind of get a gauge on how the aquifer system is holding up with our usage. And there are 4 wells in Ogden Valley that have been monitored for a long time. That's thanks to our colleagues over at the U.S. Geological Survey. And so these 4 wells I've shown here on this map, they're in green. We've got a couple in the confined aquifer, one by Huntsville and one up by Geertsen Creek, and then a couple in the unconfined section of the aquifer. So let's look at those as over time. So we've got time since about 1980 up to when we started the study, 2016. So the well that's in that confined aquifer by Huntsville is shown on the top, and you can see that it has not a significant trend, neither upward nor downward. Similarly, the other 3 wells have a pretty straight trend. They're not going up or down in water level. And so what that really indicates to us is that the system, at least where these wells are, is in a pretty balanced state. You're not getting more water than you can handle, which would mean you'd have your water levels up, which we hardly ever see in Utah. And we're not seeing long-term groundwater decline in these areas. So that means that it's not being overdrafted in these areas. And having this kind of record for 40 years is really invaluable, and we rely on it a lot. So let's see. All right, let's next go into seepage runs. So this is something we did to try to get a handle on how much surface water and groundwater interact. So a seepage run is basically you measure flow along a stream from upstream to downstream in a bunch of places in as short a time period as you can, and then you compare those measurements. And if you have more water at the top of the stream and less water at the bottom of the stream, that means that between those 2 points, that stream was actually putting water into the ground. And so we show that on these maps. The next couple of maps I'll show where that water is going from the stream bed into the groundwater system is shown in blue. The numbers there are the number of cubic feet per second through that reach that the stream is losing. Where the stream is, wait, I think I said that backwards. The losing stretches are shown in red. So that's where water is going from the stream into the groundwater. The gaining stretches are shown in blue. That's where the aquifer is actually in contact with the stream and putting water into the stream. So that's where you're getting base flow coming into your stream. All right, so we did this twice. We did it once kind of before peak runoff in March, and then again in November during base flow. So in March, we ended up with this kind of map. So the blue, again, is where the streams are gaining. And so you can see kind of a mess throughout the valley. In the North Fork, we've got both gaining and losing reaches kind of flip-flopping back and forth. In the South Fork, we see a losing stretch from where it emanates, the stream, South Fork of the Ogden River, it emanates from the canyon. It's losing the whole way until it hits the edge of that confining unit, and then it starts gaining again. So once again, that water can go out. There's no confining unit to stop it, so it can go out into the aquifer. But then once it gets to that edge of that confining unit, there's not really enough room for it to keep losing water out, and that aquifer is filled up and starts bringing water back into that stream. So that's what's going on there. The Middle Fork was actually gaining through March. And overall, in March, we saw that there's a net gain in these streams before they get to the reservoir of about 63 cubic feet per second. So we repeated this at the same exact locations in November. We got much smaller flows, obviously, but we also saw a lot of those stream segments switch from gaining to losing. So you can see in this picture that there's a lot more red sections of the streams. So I'm going to go back to March again. So you see more blue segments. November, more red segments. So in November, we had a net loss of 24 cubic feet per second. So we also did a seepage study in the middle of the irrigation season on the Ogden Valley Canal. And once again, we measured all these places in one day and compared them. And what we found when we did this in July of 2016 was that the canal was actually losing about half of its flow. And there are areas that were gaining, but generally overall, more areas were losing water than were gaining water. And so in the report, we extrapolated that to a volume for the year. And so we just took that rate of loss of 47% and applied it to what the Ogden River Commissioner's report said was in that canal for the year. And that's where we got our 3,300 acre feet. If there wasn't, I know some of the water users have said that number's too high because they didn't think that much water was in that canal. And so if that value that we used for the number going into the canal is not accurate, then that total number would be inaccurate. But we still believe that seepage rate of losing about half of its flow, at least when the canal was full in July, is pretty good guide to see how much water is the condition of the canal. Yeah, so overall, basically the results of the seepage studies on the streams indicates that those groundwater and the surface water are really well connected. There's a lot of gaining sections, there's a lot of losing sections. That means that aquifer is in contact with the stream and water is going into and out of the streams. All right, take a little break. All right, next topic is environmental tracers. So these are some really cool techniques that we use to understand where recharge is coming from, to once again understanding the degree of interconnectedness. And they use chemicals that are in the water or properties of the water themselves. They're not contaminants in any way. They're just these things that we can use to understand groundwater flow systems. So one of the first one I want to talk about is recharge temperature and groundwater age. So we use dissolved noble gas concentrations and tritium concentrations and carbon-14 dating of the water. So we can have the noble gas concentrations give us a recharge temperature. And what that is cold recharge temperatures will happen where, like on the mountains, when you have snowpack melting, it gets into the ground and that is going to recharge at a certain temperature. That temperature is going to be much colder than water that comes to the valley, maybe a summer thunderstorm that's got the temperature of the water is actually warmer. We can actually figure out what temperature that water was when it recharged the aquifer. So, and we figure that out by sampling these wells when they're down in the valley, and that because those noble gas concentrations are locked in when it recharges the aquifer, we can tell what temperature that water was when it was recharged. And so for temperatures, you see on the map there, we've got temperatures, these are in degrees C, and just look at the relative values. We actually see colder recharge temperatures in the North Fork arm and warmer recharge temperatures in the South Fork, and then kind of middle-ish in the Middle Fork in the center of the valley. So overall, these temperatures, the mean temperature is about 2 to 4 degrees colder than the basin groundwater temperature. So what that means is that water was recharged at a colder temperature, which we infer to mean it was either recharged high in the mountains or it was recharged a long time ago when our climate was colder. We can add on to that our age dating of the water. So older water with our carbon-14 dates, we infer that those are recharged high in the mountains and it's taken a long time to get down into the valley to where we can sample them. And then the young water has tritium in it, and that can only be in there if it's been at the surface less than 50 years ago. So when we find tritium in water, we know that it has recharged pretty recently. And so we see younger water and warmer temperatures in the South Fork, kind of middle temperatures and mixed water, some old water, some young waters in the middle part, and then up in the North Fork we see older water. So what's that saying to us is that North Fork is probably dominated by bedrock recharge that's recharged long ago on the tops of the mountains. And the South Fork sees more near surface water and shorter travel times. All right, another type of environmental isotopes that we use at Environment Traces is stable isotopes of water. So isotopes are forms of an element that contain equal numbers of protons but different numbers of neutrons. So they have different mass. And that's key because that different mass plays a key role in phase change. So when it goes from water to vapor and gets rained out and snowed out and back and forth again, that changes the isotope ratio in the water. So the farther you are from the ocean, we call it the lighter, because it's actually the lighter mass of these atoms, the lighter your isotopes or your signature should be. And then also temperature has a big part to do with it. So snow has a much lighter signature than rainwater. And so we use these charts with hydrogen on one end and oxygen on the other end to look at our stable isotopes. So here are the samples. We collected 307 samples. So on the left, we see precipitation. So all of our precip falls along a meteoric water line, which is expected. But notice that the summer precip, so that's rainfall that happens in the summer, and that was collected on the valley floor and up in the mountains. That has this kind of different signature than everything else, than the non-summer precip and the snowpack and our groundwater and surface water. So the square on the left-hand chart is actually the whole square on the right-hand chart. So you can see that, which is, the right hand is all of our surface water and groundwater. So basically what that's saying is that the surface water and groundwater is made of everything but summer precip. So summer precipitation is not making it into the groundwater system. Yeah, and so we've got this big range of precipitation, the non-summer precip, and the groundwater basically integrates that. So since we had enough samples, we could actually parse out differences between these different subbasins, the North Fork, Middle Fork, and South Fork. So our question we were trying to answer with that was how much recharge is from streams versus bedrock in each of the subbasins. So we looked at just the streams, springs, and wells. And they look, on this chart that you see right now, they look pretty close in range. They're all at like about -120 per mil. But there's actually enough differences there that, and we could separate them out by wells, springs, and streams in the North Fork, the Middle Fork, and the South Fork areas. And there's enough differences in those isotope ratios to actually do some really interesting, we did a Monte Carlo analysis. So we looked at, let's just say the North Fork. So we've got 39 stream samples. That's this number in the parentheses. ST stands for streams. We had 34 wells in bedrock, wells or springs in bedrock. That's the BR. And then we had 25 valley fill wells or springs. And so and the streams have this isotope signature, the bedrock has this isotope signature. So how much of each of those two end member components do you have to mix to get to this valley fill signature? So we did this Monte Carlo analysis to do that. And so we kind of mixed those two. We did it on the North Fork, we did it on the South Fork. And when you do this Monte Carlo analysis, you get to the results are shown in these little boxes on the bottom. The numbers highlighted with these zigzag boxes here show that in the North Fork, about a third, 34% of the water in the valley fill aquifer is from streams. That has an isotope signature that looks like it came from a stream. Conversely, it's got about 66% of that water then is from the bedrock. So the North Fork, at least from this analysis, looks like it has more bedrock water in the valley fill aquifer, water that came through that bedrock block. The South Fork is kind of opposite. So it has much more stream water, 60% versus 40%, stream water versus bedrock water. And then the Middle Fork was somewhere in between at about halvesies. Overall, this is showing that about half of the water in the valley fill comes from surface water from streams and near surface sources, and half of it comes from bedrock recharge, bedrock throughput, mountain block recharge. All right, so on to the next topic is water budget. So when you make a groundwater budget, you basically just kind of tally up your inputs and outputs. For inputs in Ogden Valley, we have precipitation as our main input to the system as a whole. You can also have into the valley floor system, we'll have mountain block inflow, shown in this arrow over here. And then you have recharge coming through the unconfined portion of the aquifer. You have recharge going into the shallow confined aquifer. Anything falling on the surface there can recharge the aquifer. Surface runoff is another input into the valley fill aquifer. And then discharges, outputs are the surface water outflow, they're shown in red. So we've got surface water outflow, which is basically Ogden River going down Ogden Canyon, anything out of the dam. You've got groundwater outflow, which we looked at and decided there wasn't a lot, just a little bit of that. And then we have evaporation is a big component of discharge. Evapotranspiration, which is where the plants use the water. And then we have well withdrawal. Those are our outputs. So to kind of get a handle on all of these numbers, we used a couple of different tools, Utah Basin Model and the Soil and Water Assessment Tool. And basically these are soil moisture balances. So if there's too much water, it'll actually allow that water to, these models will allow water to go recharge into the aquifer system. So that's how we get at the amount of recharge and the amount of ET using this and some other tools. All right, so here's our numbers that we came up with. So this is the overall basin-wide. So this is the entire watershed. Our input is precipitation at about 540,000 acre-feet per year. Our biggest discharge then is evapotranspiration. And then another discharge, so that our surface water discharge there is shown as Pine View Reservoir discharge. That's 150,000 acre-feet per year. The Ogden City wellfield discharges 11,000-ish, and then we've got a little bit of groundwater discharge out. So those are our main. There's some other minor players, but those are the bigger volumes. And then we didn't have much change in storage, and that's based mostly on those long-term water level trends. There's not a lot more water going into the system or a lot being mined out of the system. So we can actually look at where that recharge is happening. And this is a relative recharge distribution. So areas that have more recharge are shown in the cooler colors, the blues and the greens. And the relatively less recharge is shown in orange colors. So again, like I had talked about with the geologic, how we kind of bend the geology into good aquifers, bad aquifers, and so-so aquifers, that shows up here a little bit. So you remember I talked about up northwest of Eden, there's that kind of flat area with some carbonate rocks on it. We think that that's a pretty good area for recharge to get into the groundwater system. On that map I first showed, there was a lot of blue, good aquifer over in the South Fork, which would seem to indicate that that should have turned out blue on this map. But because it's a little bit lower in elevation and it has a lot of vegetation on it, it's that ET kind of counteracted some of what we think might be a good aquifer there. But it is a big sub-drainage basin, so there is a lot of recharge coming in from the South Fork. Okay, so we actually kind of separated this into 3 different subbasins, the North Fork, Middle Fork, and South Fork. And the numbers on here I'm calling input water, so that's the precipitation minus the ET. So that's evapotranspiration. So that's kind of like the water that's available to interact with the streams, with the aquifers, and not necessarily available water. It's just the water that can actually get into the aquifer system. So the 3 different subbasins, we have South Fork at the most, so 63,000 acre-feet per year. And this is for 2016, which is a pretty average year. So that's kind of this is sort of to show you the relative amounts of water in each of these subbasins. Middle Fork and North Fork have a little bit less recharge coming in. And that's basically a factor of area, drainage basin area. All right, so outputs then, we've got stream flow. So from the North Fork River, we've got about 33,000, in 2016, we had about 33,000 acre-feet of water flowing into the reservoir. We've got, and then the aquifer system underneath of that is providing about 12,000 acre-feet of water to the reservoir. That's what the little yellow, the yellow arrow there is depicting. In the Middle Fork, we have about 23,000 acre-feet as surface water and 15,000 acre-feet as groundwater discharge to the reservoir. And then in the, actually I misspoke, that's groundwater discharge to the reservoir and the confined aquifer below that. And then in the South Fork, we actually have a lot of surface water discharge, so 57,000 acre feet in 2016, and a slightly less groundwater flow. And then discharge out of the system, again, is that not? Oh, and then also the canal, that's what showed up there, is we got about 7,000 acre feet of water going from the South Fork Basin into mostly the Middle Fork to use in the Ogden Valley Canal. And then we've got our outputs out of the system are Ogden City Wellfield at about 12,000 acre feet, and then the stream, Ogden River, at 125,000 acre feet per year. So it kind of gives you a visual of sort of where the water budget numbers fall in with respect to these different subbasins. So we can look at the 2016 Valley Fill Aquifer Groundwater Budget. And we made the assumption that the aquifer is in balance. So we've got 67,000 acre feet per year, roughly, both recharge and discharge. And again, that was based on our long-term water level trends for one of the mostly. So 2016 was a pretty average year. And what the kind of takeaways from these two screens are that for recharge, we kind of have a three-way split between mountain block recharge and the losing streams and canal seepage and other canal seepage, irrigation seepage, and this in-place recharge, which is that falling on the valley fill aquifer and actually going into the system from directly. Our discharge, our biggest point of discharge for that valley fill aquifer is to the reservoir. At about half of the discharge. And the other players in discharge are the Ogden City Wellfield's pretty big, and then this is base flow to streams and springs that's on the valley fill. So as they come out of the mountains. And our evapotranspiration for this is for the valley fill aquifer budget, was actually fairly low in this case. ET is really big overall, but most of that happens up in the mountains outside the valley fill. All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit about water quality and septic tank density. We've got on the screen now is a map of total dissolved solids. Anything less than 250 milligrams per liter is shown as clear. The kind of minty green is 250 to 500 milligrams per liter. So both of those classes are really good. That's really good water quality. You don't have a lot of things dissolved in the water. And nothing actually exceeded, none of the drinking water wells exceeded any drinking water standards. So that's a good thing. So chemically speaking, we use these Piper diagrams to kind of give us a visual of the type of water, the water quality that we have. So the size of these symbols on these triangles is proportional to the total dissolved solids. So bigger symbols have more stuff dissolved in the water. And then where they fall is just kind of a visual representation of the type of water quality that we have. So streams end up being a pretty tight, pretty dilute and a calcium bicarbonate type. So that's what this diagram is showing. Bedrock, on the other hand, has a wider variety of water types. So you can have some with more chloride in them, some with more sulfate in it, more sodium. And they also, you'll notice the symbols are just larger. So there's more things dissolved in that bedrock water. And then not surprisingly, the valley fill aquifer is sort of a mix of those two, as we found with our isotopes and our seepage studies. All right, nitrate is always of interest to people. So we've got a map of nitrate concentrations. So the circles are samples that we took, and the squares are from wells that are, by and large, in the shallow, unconfined aquifer. So everything that we collected was less than 7.7 milligrams per liter, and that's 10 milligrams per liter is the EPA drinking water standard. So you want to stay below that. By and large, we were really a lot less than that. Most of the dots on here, you see the circles, are less than 3 milligrams per liter in all of the wells that we sampled, except 1 or 2. Not the case for the shallow unconfined aquifers. So the Utah State University about a decade ago installed a number of wells in that shallow unconfined aquifer. Those are shown as these squares. And you can see they're almost all red, which means they're more than 3. A number of them were quite high, up to 47 milligrams per liter. So luckily, we're not drinking that water, but that water does go into Pine Butte Reservoir. So it's adding to that nutrient load. Yeah, and so we use this data to come up with a geometric mean number for the next step, which what I'll show on the next slide, to kind of figure out how much more septic tanks we can add to the system before we start climbing that nitrate number higher than we want. I will point out that statistically, in 2016, the nitrate in the principal aquifer is higher than it was in 1998. We took some data from 1998 and 1985 and came up with a number there. So it's almost double. It's still low, 0.81 as our milligrams per liter as our mean in the principal aquifer. So that's still low, but it's higher than it was in the past. So something to keep an eye on. So again, how is our water quality affected if more septic tanks are added? So we did that using a mass balance approach, which basically you add the mass from the new septic tanks to what's already there, that 1.4543, and then you flush that with the available groundwater in your system. And it's just a simple spreadsheet model. And we did it because Ogden Valley has a lot of seasonal use and not full-time occupancy of the homes. We did 3 different population scenarios. Weber County as a whole has 3 people per household as an average, but Ogden Valley has much less than that. They actually have 1.7. When you take the number of people permanently living in Ogden Valley and the number of houses there, you get 1.7 people per household. So we wanted to see what would happen with some different growth scenarios. So starting at 1.43 milligrams per liter is this dashed line on the bottom. And let's just say, for argument's sake, we are okay letting the groundwater go up in nitrate by 1 milligram per liter. If we as a community say we're okay doing that, how many more septic tanks could we add to stay below that, or to get to that target, stay below that target? So how we do that is, I think the next slide. Yeah, so we currently have a little over 2,000 septic tanks, and this is in the valley fill aquifer. If we want to grow that using 1.7 people per household, that means just the people that are living in Ogden Valley permanently. They're the only people that can stay there, and we don't get anybody else coming in to use seasonal use or part-time use. If you continue to develop with 1.7 people per household, you can add about, what's this, 2,200 to 7,000. So roughly 5,000 more septic tanks, more houses on septic tanks, before you would kind of get to that 1 milliliter degradation. But those houses are already built. So what if for some reason land use changed and people started moving there more full time? Oops, sorry. So basically fill up the houses to 3 people per household and then keep adding septic tanks. You get to 6. So the numbers showing up there are the minimum, or the maximum lot size that you should allow septic tanks to be built on to keep your water quality at that 1 milliliter per liter degradation target. We did this again for something kind of more intermediate, 2.4 people per household. So if you start with 2.4 people per household, add a bunch more septic tanks to get to 1 milligram per liter. You can only add a couple more thousand, 3,500. You should have your lot sizes no more than about 4 acres, no less than. But again, if the house is already built and you start putting people in them, What happens if you just fill up those houses first? There you get to around 6 acres per septic tank. So basically, using these two different population scenarios, we would recommend, so the current level of for lot sizes in Ogden Valley is 3 acres per lot. We think that you should probably even increase that to 6 acres per lot if you want to use conventional septic tanks for all the new construction. So there's other ways around that. You could go to sewer. You could put in advanced septic systems. There's many. They're more expensive, but they do a better job at removing the nitrate and other pharmaceuticals and other things that are in your wastewater. But if you want to continue using conventional septic tanks, it's probably going to have continued impact to the nitrate rising. All right, so I think I've talked long enough. I just want to go over again what we talked about with our major conclusions of what I talked about today. There's more in the report, but so in the groundwater system, our position and thickness of the principal confining unit is very important to groundwater flow and to water quality. Surface water and groundwater are highly connected. The streams can go from gaining to losing throughout the year, and that the canals are leaky and recharge the aquifer. Long-term water levels indicate that most of the system is not in an overdraft state. And we figured about half of the water in the valley fill aquifer is from surface water and half is from bedrock. And there's slight differences between the different arms, subbasins of the valley. The water budget that we came up with is about 67,000 acre-feet per year, and that was in 2016, which was a fairly average year. Roughly equal recharge from streams and canals versus mountain block versus that in-place precip. And the largest discharge component is the Ogden River from the valley fill aquifer, at least. Chemically, pretty good quality. Nitrate is high in the shallow, unconfined aquifer. And then just what we just went over with the septic tanks, you should continue development using those conventional septic tanks will probably have an impact. So what does that actually mean for the future of Ogden Valley groundwater? Groundwater is a system, and so when you tweak one area of it, you will have impacts in another area. This is particularly true in Ogden Valley because of that interconnectedness of the groundwater and surface water. So if a drying climate means there's less recharge coming into that mountain block, or if water use changes to be from wells in the mountain block or springs in the mountain block rather than out of Pine View Reservoir, what might that have? What effect might that have? Mountain springs flow might decrease, might have decreased base flow to streams. The bedrock potentiometric surface might decrease, and because it's a bedrock there's slower groundwater flow travel times because there's lower hydraulic conductivity. Those changes might take a while to be able to be seen as a potentiometric surface. So, but eventually, if you don't have as much water in the mountain block coming into the valley fill, that will lower that water table. Also, if you line the canals, that would probably lower your valley fill aquifer water table as well, because there's not recharge from those leaking canals. So if the valley fill aquifer does go down, that would result in reduced base flow to valley streams. It could result in reduced valley fill aquifer to Pine View Reservoir. And it could, if you take that water table in right where the principal aquifer becomes confined, where water has to split to go on the confined aquifer versus the unconfined aquifer, the shallow unconfined. If you lower that water table, then that's going to put more of that near surface water, which might have more septic tank discharge or any kind of contamination from the surface, that would actually end up being forced into the confined aquifer. And similarly, if you lower your water table, your shallow domestic wells could also be drawing from that kind of more near water table water, which has a more chance to have some contamination to it. Yeah, so that's all I have to talk about today. If you want to read more, you can read this 400-page report, or I forget how long it is. It's fairly long. It's available on our website, geology.utah.gov, or as a Christmas present for your favorite person. You can buy it in paper form for 25 bucks. And just wanted to say our funding partners is funded halvesies between Utah Geological Survey and the Division of Water Rights. And Division of Water Rights was able to get support from Weber County, Weber Basin Water Conservancy District, Ogden City, and we also got some funding from the Division of Drinking Water for the water quality portion of this. So thanks to everybody that helped get this report out and complete the study. Okay, and I guess with that, I will stop presenting. Here. And I guess we can either have questions, or if Eric, you want to take back over and talk about what Water Rights is doing, or if I should take questions now. I think we maybe decided to do.
I think it would, Lucy, I think it would be great if we could take questions now while some of the study might be in folks' mind. Were there any questions for Lucy at this time regarding the data that she has presented? Looks like Pamela.
Yes. Can you hear me? Is this working? Great.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. So you talk about the nitrate issue and recommendation that if we were going to add septic systems, there'd be a 6-acre minimum. And I have to admit, I don't know all the treatment processes that Powder Mountain Sewer, Wolf Creek Sewer use for their wastewater treatment and how effective they are at nitrate removal. But did you look at that and see what the impact of having the same increase in population would be if they went to sewer? I mean, how much of an improvement would that be based on the treatment processes that are used?
Yeah, so basically we made the assumption that those lagoon systems, the Wolf Creek Water and Sewer, the lagoon system is not contributing nitrate. So that's going to basically eliminate that use from the nitrate budget. So we didn't, do any kind of modeling like that, but yeah, that, and then also if you went to a conventional sewer system on down the line, that's treated and depending on where it's discharged, it wouldn't likely be discharged back into the groundwater. So again, that just removes that impact.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Lucy, there's a few other people. Do you want to just go ahead and call on them to answer their questions?
Sure. I'm trying to find where I need to pull up my, trying to get my.
Do you want me just to call their names?
Yeah, why don't
Okay.
you do that, because I can't find them.
Okay, so it looks like Jan Fulmer has raised her hand.
Yes, can you hear me? Okay. I don't know if this is the appropriate time, Lucy, but I did send a packet of documentation in with one main question. I just wanted to make sure you received it.
We did, yes. Actually, Eric brought that into me today, so I kind of just breezed through it a little bit to get at the question. And I think the gist, and you can tell me if this is right or not, but you're basically wondering if there's enough water for continued development.
Yes, because there was an extensive general plan done for Ogden Valley that Weber County paid for. They hired consultants, and they projected the development of the valley based on 1 residential home per 3 acres. All right. Now, the majority of the homes in the valley right now, they are not on the really high-tech Wolf Creek Water and Sewer Improvement District. In other words, they've got different kinds of septic systems, and I included the data that I got for the Weber Morgan Health Department, who has to approve whatever on-site waste treatment, people want to have with their dwelling. But what is happening now, Lucy, is based on that plan, I sent you the projections that they had for growth in the valley for the population. But now with some ordinance changes, especially for accessory dwelling units, that could really blow the population and the density significantly. So, I mean, I'm not a water expert, but I'm one that believes in, let's look at this. Let's not do a ready, fire, aim, but let's look at some of the data and see, is there a limit on the density of the population? Is there going to be some limitation on on-site wastewater treatment? Because a lot of those accessory dwelling units, what is currently proposed right now is to have an accessory dwelling unit in every zoned area that allows a residential home.
Yeah, this is, I think somebody from Water Rights might be able to expand on this, but what generally happens when you develop a community is that water changes in use. It may change in place of use as well, but it's now being used as agriculture. So it's being used as surface water taken out of the streams and put on to grow hay and other crops. And so as far as a water balance issue, the system's in a pretty decent water balance right now. And so as long as, and Water Rights has a policy about this, but as long as there's not more water being taken out of the system and not recharged via, irrigation recharge or septic tank recharge or whatever, then you're not going to see that water level decline either, and you're not going to see mining of the water. So as far as budget goes, we're not seeing anything yet, and I think the thinking is that as you add more people, you take away farmland. Does any Water Rights want to expand on that?
So Lucy, yeah, you're exactly right. And Jan, I think that Eric's presentation will talk about the current water right policy and what that is, and that at this time we don't propose any changes, but we're looking for additional comments. So Lucy's exactly right.
Teresa and Lucy, thank you. And, I know sometimes there's no yes or no answer, but if this is something, if the valley is going to really start to grow and we're going to have density beyond the projections and units beyond the projections, what could be done to watch this situation that basically says, wait a minute, we're getting to a critical point here. Because I don't know if you folks know this, but back in 1997, I believe it was, I'm not sure where this directive came from, but they were having difficulty because you could build one home per acre. So the development rights, if somebody had 5 acres, they had 5 development rights. But there seemed to be a little problem with a well on that 1 acre and then having your wastewater treatment on that 1 acre. And so it was changed to only allow 1 development right per 3 acres. And when that announcement came out, we weren't here at the time, but I know it was not a popular thing because people basically lost some of their development rights, and there's value to that. So I wouldn't want to see something come up all of a sudden, and then we have, a lot of disgruntled people. Teresa?
Yeah, no, great, thanks. Yeah, I'm gonna defer to Water Rights on that because that's definitely a policy question. And like I said, when you do changes in water use in different areas, especially in the bedrock, it can take a while to kind of see some of those effects. So by doing this study now, we've got a good baseline, we've got a lot of great data, and so as development occurs in Ogden Valley, we can compare it back to 2016 and again to 1985 when USGS did their study and some other studies between, and keep an eye on that and make sure and use that data to guide those policy decisions.
Yeah. Thanks, Jan, for the question. We do have one other person that raised their hand, Lucy, Fred Blickel.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, Lucy, great job of presenting some really technical data and boiling it down so we could all understand it. It's
Thanks.
pretty amazing. I had two questions. One, the discharge through Ogden River, is that variable year to year? And if so, how is that? Who determines that? How do they determine that?
Oh, you mean how much is let down Ogden River?
Yes.
Yeah, and it's definitely variable throughout the year. There are different water right holders that have rights to pull out of the reservoir. And so the volume that's actually measured in the stream is kind of what's left over after some of those water users have taken their allotted share. So how that's determined is just who has water rights on it, right, Teresa?
Right.
I mean, is that kind of the point of your question? Is that my understanding your question?
Yeah, well, I mean, they seem to let more water out, at different times of year and less at others. I imagine that has to do with, base stream flow that they need to have in the Ogden River. But other times they're, bombing a lot of water out. And if so, why is that? Are there users on the Ogden side that need that water, get that water out of the stream?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's a couple of canals that take off from the river. There's a pipeline that actually goes from the reservoir to Ogden Valley. And then there's in-stream use as well in the river. But yeah, it's used quite a bit. Yeah,
okay. And who is the person that makes that determination on the release of water through the
the Bureau of Reclamation runs the dam. So they have kind of the floodgate. And then there's
we have a river commissioner, and I believe he's on this meeting as well. I believe he is. I think I see his name on the list. So Fred, we do with the Division of Water have a distribution section, and we have a river commissioner on that system.
Okay, well, great, thanks. I've been wondering about that for a while. My other question was then on the east side, groundwater users on the east side, has there been any quantitative evaluation done to, approximate how much water can be taken out, groundwater on the east side, without, depleting the capacity of the aquifer?
So like you're talking about the South Fork area?
Well, up, more up into the mountains. I know that up at Powder Mountain, they have wells up there, and I've seen them installing other wells. And at what point will that have an impact on the reserve of the basin?
Well, I mean, the primary focus of this report, of the study, is to understand those volumes. How much is in the bedrock, how much is in the valley fill. And so we have good numbers on that now, and we had some numbers from the USGS, a while ago. So now water rights can actually use that. Sometimes the next step is to do some sort of groundwater modeling. Kind of that's up to the Division of Water Rights if they want to go that far with it. I think that this study does show that the systems are really pretty well connected. So I think that water rights will use the results of this study to guide that development in the mountains, and and hopefully keep an eye on things as it's moving along that way.
Lucy, you have some questions in the comments as well.
Yeah, I see that. So we could go with let's see, we've got, thanks, Paul. All right, first question from Ronald Gleason. Does the Utah Geological Survey have a stance on the study that NRCS is doing concerning lining or piping the canal? I did briefly look at that. I don't know that we're really in a position to have a stance on it, but from the results of the study, that canal is leaking quite a bit. And so if you're not letting that water then recharge the aquifer along the east side of the valley fill, that's going to affect the water level. So I talked about that in the last couple of slides there, like what will happen if that recharge is not coming from the canal. And so, yeah, our stance is you just have to make sure that the water users that are trying to get water that has been recharged that way are still made whole eventually. And then the other thing I didn't mention is that recharge that comes out of the canal is basically South Fork water, river water, which is really good quality. So by not adding that water along that canal system and putting it in as flood irrigation or irrigation recharge, you're taking away some of the fresh recharge. So that would allow contaminant sources to have more of an impact because you're not able to flush it with such fresh water. So again, the volumes we came up were somewhere like 3,000 acre-feet per year. Maybe that's a little high. We'd have to look at the volumes that are released in the canal overall. So it's not a huge chunk of the water budget. So you have that on the side. That's in favor of the valley fill aquifer system. But so that's my stance on it. That's not really a stance, but that's kind of what would happen. I'll go to the next question. How should we think about increased water usage by Nordic ski resort expansion for snowmaking? That's by Beth Keswick. So yeah, I talked about that a little bit. So increasing use in the mountains is going to have effect. Probably going to have the effect of decreased spring flow, water table in the mountain block going down, and also maybe decreased flow to streams. And then whatever happens up gradient then affects down gradient. So that's what would likely happen if there's enough of that kind of use and continued use and more use that way. And so basically that becomes water rights priority is to balance the needs of those different users. So I think they're going to talk about water policy in there, but that's kind of what's going to happen geologically speaking. So I'll let them talk about how they want to deal with them water right holders. Oh, Miranda is on, and she corrected me that Wolf Creek is not on a lagoon. It is a tertiary treatment, and there's about 90% removal of nitrate. So thanks, Miranda. I use the term lagoon, and I should be more specific. And then we've got, I don't really know how to answer this one. Paul Brook Joyce at Jan, what's on the table right now with the county is you have to purchase 3 acres of additional land and dedicate it to a preserve before the county will approve an ADU. It's not passed though. So I think that's just some extra information.
Yeah, that was extra information for Jan's question.
Okay, right. Cool. And he also says the county needs to fix the LUC to start so developments cannot be approved without appropriate secondary water rights, which happens consistently now. I think that is a question for water rights. And then there's one asking to me from Pam Kramer, did any of the assessment of gaining and losing streams address stream channel alteration or disturbances which may have broken up the stream bottom contributing to water loss? Does stream channel disturbances factor into gaining and losing streams at all? Yeah, it does. So yeah, when we do groundwater models, that conductivity of the stream channel is a big player on it. I can tell you from doing a lot of water sample, a lot of stream flow measurements in Ogden Valley, some of those stream channels are really bouldery, very, very bouldery and very conductive for water to get into the stream channel. So we didn't look specifically at what would happen if you, you know, do something with that stream channel, but it would definitely impact it to the effect that, you know, the water table, when the water table intersects that stream channel, that's where you can get that gaining stream happening. Losing streams can actually just lose water into the unsaturated zone, and that can make it into the water table. So it would, yeah, it would, if you ripped up the stream channel, it would probably, if that was a losing section, it would lose more water until enough sediment comes down to clog that back up again. All right. So those are all the questions that were in the comments. Is there anybody else with their hands up?
I don't believe so. So
Okay.
I think that's the questions for Lucy. So I definitely want to thank the UGS, Lucy and Hugh and Paul, for the great work they do. And as Lucy has explained, us as the Division of Water Rights, we look to the UGS to help us understand the science in some of the various basins. And this is one of those that we've worked with them on. And some other partners contributed some funding to help make this study happen. And so it helps us then understand the area better as we look at water policy and how water rights, how we need to manage the water rights that are there and any future water rights. So thank you again, Lucy, for coming to present, or wherever you are. I guess you didn't come anywhere, but
no, I'm here in the office as well.
So it's kind of odd that we don't have to travel, but I'm very glad because of the snow today. So just a couple things before I turn over to Eric, is for him to talk about water rights and the policy. Just a couple housekeeping items. Don't forget to sign in and give us your contact information in the link that James has put in the chat box. That is how we're going to get a hold of you again if we have a follow-up meeting to this or have any additional information. So please give us your name and contact information so we can get a hold of you if we need to. I think as of just a minute ago, there was only 18 and there's been like 80 people on here. So help us be able to contact you. So click on that. The presentations, I saw a couple people taking photos. These presentations will be put on our website at waterrights.utah.gov. So you can go back and look at these presentations and these slides. And it is recorded, so you can also relive this moment in time. So those will be available. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric Jones, who is our regional engineer, and he'll talk about our water rights policy.
Okay, hello. My comments are going to be brief, but important. So we'll go ahead and get started. So the current policy does not allow any new appropriations of surface waters or groundwater. Currently, to drill like a new well, you would have to file an exchange application, and those are typically done through Weber Basin Water Conservancy District. Or if you have an existing water right, you can file a change application and move your well to a different location if you'd like to. And Lucy kind of touched on that. As you file the change, you change the nature of use and the point of diversion. And all of those applications are evaluated on their own merit. So that would be how they potentially impact the entire system, or how they impact senior water rights near the proposed points of diversion. And again, changes are allowed to go from surface to groundwater or vice versa, but those are also evaluated on their own merit and based on information submitted showing that the proposed use will not impair existing senior water right holders in the area. And Teresa mentioned this already, that based off of this study, we are not proposing any changes to the current policy. We are still going to be evaluating all applications under the policy as is, but we are open to comments and questions that may lead us to look at changing the policy in the future. For more details, you can visit our website, waterrights.utah.gov, and then on the side there's a little map of Utah, colorful map. You click on that, and then you're going to click on Area 35, which will bring you to the policy page, and there's reports and more information on that policy page. I see a hand up. Kirk, if you want to go ahead and ask your question now, I'll take that now.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Regarding the water rights and the current policies, what are we doing to kind of police, I guess that's not the right word, but to keep people from illegally pumping out of the North Fork water or the canal or South Fork. And I also have seen there's somebody even currently now, they've been building a lot of ponds on their property right next to the streams that have old water rights, and that water is subbing into these holding ponds people are sprinkling their horse field with. Or I saw a pond going in the other day, and it's right in the mouth of a drainage that normally would flow all the way down into Chicken Creek. So, you know, it seems to me that those are pretty big alterations to the existing shareholders' rights. How do you guys handle things like that? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Kirk. So we rely heavily on the water users themselves to help us. We are about 100 staff members here, and in my region, there are 4 of us. And then the river commissioner has a few deputy commissioners as well, but it's very difficult for us to be on the ground reviewing everyone's diversions on an annual basis. So we rely on the water users to contact us and get more information from us or from our website to determine if the use is illegal. There could potentially be an approved application where those ponds are being built. But again, if you wanted to call me directly, or someone from our office would be able to give you more information to see if those uses are illegal. And then if it is illegal, then we would ask you to file an enforcement action through our office outlining the illegal use and the nature of use, and then documenting it as best you can through pictures and different information that you could provide us that would allow us to approach that person to curtail their illegal use or completely stop their illegal use, depending on what we find as far as a legal water right for them. Okay, hopefully that answers your question, Kirk. Do you have a follow-up question on that? If not, just stay silent. Perfect. Okay, with that, I'm just going to flip it over to questions for everyone. If you have questions you'd like to ask, and there, Kirk, there's our information. If you want to, you can email that email address there or call that number in to get more information. It'll usually come to me or one of my staff members. So.
And Paul had put the link to the UGS report in the comments. So thanks, Paul. And there's a few other comments in there too that people might want to read. Miranda has raised her hand.
Okay, Miranda. Go for it, Miranda.
Hi guys, had to turn on the lights here. I'd be remiss if I didn't raise the question of the exchange application system, whereby I understand pretty well how it works. You file an exchange application, you buy a contract with Weber Basin, you file the exchange, and then you're allowed to take the water out of the aquifer. And my understanding is that Weber Basin releases the same amount of water downstream to the users, either from Pineview or from a different reservoir. So I understand how it works, but those of us that are between the point of diversion, be it up at the top of the mountain on Powder Mountain, or high up on near Causey or along the South Fork or wherever, we're sort of the meat in the sandwich. We're losing water above us, and then the water is being released from below us. So I don't feel we are made whole. And I would appreciate your comments, Eric, on that. And the continuing number of contracts being sold by Weber Basin is a concern to those of us that live here and are watching the gradual increase in the amount of diversion from groundwater. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Miranda. And we encourage you as a current water right holder that anytime an application is filed, hopefully you're getting notice of that either through our email system or through the newspaper, which is how we advertise the applications, that you are filing a protest with our office saying that this exchange will impair your existing water right. And when you do that, then we're able to work with the applicant and with you as a protestant to make sure that you are staying whole with your senior water right to this new application that comes in. I don't see very many protests from the water user community up in that area on exchange applications. So that says to me that there isn't that big of an issue in certain places. I've been in this position 6 months, and I think I've only had to deal with one protested exchange application in the Ogden Valley, and the applicant and the protestant came to a resolution to ensure that the existing water right holder was made whole through the application process. So that's my encouragement. Teresa, I don't know if you want to add comment to that or not.
Sure. No, you did a good job there, Eric. I think all I would add, Miranda, is, you know, that's kind of the core of what we wanted to bring this information. We reached out to the UGS to do the study to help us understand so that we can balance what the resource is available in each of those areas, the East Fork, North Fork, and the Middle Fork. And then we know what water rights are being allocated, and we balance those within policy. As we move forward, you know, like Eric explained, right now we don't do new appropriations because there is no new water to be appropriated. It's fully appropriated. We do still do the exchange applications, but moving forward, now that we have the data that the UGS has developed in this study, it helps us better understand what is the resource that's there. So moving forward, you may see that we need to make some adjustments to policy. And if you feel that there are specific elements of the policy we should address, we definitely encourage you. Eric's last slide there gave a mailing address and an email, and that's what we're looking for in this public meeting. Is if you want to give us those comments and some specifics, we can continue to look at that. And that's also why I keep asking to sign up so that we can send additional information if we think we need to have another follow-up meeting. So Miranda, I'd encourage you to do that. And like Eric mentioned, every application that is filed with us, an exchange, a change, those are all advertised, and there is an opportunity for folks to protest those. So you can participate through that process. So appreciate your comment, Miranda. That's very helpful.
Before we go to Paul, who has his hand up, I just want to address this comment from Shanna Francis asking if they can print a link to the summary. And yes, all this information is public. It can be shared with anyone, anytime, anywhere. So feel free to put that up there. Okay, Paul, with that, go for it.
Awesome. Lucy, Eric, I just wanted to sincerely thank you for all that you're doing. Really appreciate you holding public events like this and helping us understand. This is a little bit of a follow-up to Miranda's question, and it's really focused towards you, Eric. What we're seeing, or at least what I am seeing in general, is that with this 3 acres per domestic unit rule up here, there's this other rule around irrigation where you need 3 acre-feet of water per acre of irrigation area. So in a 3 acre plotted subdivision, each individual plot, then if you wanted to irrigate the entire thing, we need 9 acre-feet of water. And what we're seeing is we're seeing the county, especially in the unincorporated areas that depend on wells that are not part of a culinary provider, approve these subdivisions based on an exchange permit that is taken out for each of the lots, where the 0.45 of that 1 acre-feet of the exchange application is carved off for the domestic unit, and then the 0.55 of the acre-feet that are left are typically then set aside for irrigation. And right there on the exchange application, it'll say you get 0.1833 acres or something like that of irrigation rights, which is the 0.55 divided by 3. The problem is that people buy these lots very unknowing. I'm not a water expert. People aren't water experts. And so they buy these lots that have these single acre-foot exchange permits on them. And then they go and they irrigate 3 acres of land. And they don't realize that they're stealing the water. They don't realize that the only thing that allows them to do is irrigate about 10,000 square feet, not 140,000 square feet. And so I'd like to understand what Weber Basin, you know, what the water rights. I mean, if who is looking into this, if people are aware of this is the problem, but this is what's putting the major load on the unconfined aquifer, right? This is the problem that is driving, I think, a lot of these outcomes. And so would like to know if there's any idea or attention that's being paid to correct that.
Thank you, Paul. So from my office standpoint, when we get those applications, we approve them for the 1 acre foot, 0.45, and the 0.1833 acre, like you stated. And then our office kind of just waits for the water user to submit what they have done. And so then they submit proof of beneficial use to our office, or an affidavit of beneficial use. And then we review it and we look at their uses. And more often than not is the case, they're using, like you said, more irrigation than what had they been approved. So we reach out to them and we talk to them, and we explain to them that in order to use water, you have to have a valid water right that covers all the uses. And we inform them that they are using more than what we have approved. And so we kind of say, you either need to go get an additional water right to cover the extra use, or you need to eliminate the excess use. And that's what we do from our standpoint.
Are you doing that through metering of wells, or through topographical satellite imagery, or how do you actually enforce that?
Yeah, so the initial is just through aerial imagery, and then if necessary, we do field visits to the lot to verify and to measure out. But typically it's done electronically. Like I said, there are 4 of us in this office, and we have a lot to process. So we do our best, but we do reach out frequently to the water users to tell them.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Paul,
go ahead.
Sorry, Eric. Paul, I was just going to say, Eric did explain too that, you know, we really do rely on folks like you. If there is somebody that is using more water than they should, we do have enforcement authority. Unfortunately, we have one enforcement engineer for the entire state. But as you let us know, then Eric's office, we can take a look at that. And a lot of times we can solve those issues by talking with the folks. Sometimes it does, they don't agree with us that they're using more water, and it may have to escalate to more of an enforcement issue. But we definitely try to get at those, and we're more than happy to do even community outreach to talk. You know, like some of our regional engineers, we have 7 regional offices across the state. They'll talk to different user groups or community groups to try and help them understand kind of what the limits of water rights are typically in the area and how they have to limit those uses. So I'm sure that Eric or even me, you know, if there's a community group or something that you feel that would be beneficial for us to come present the basics of water rights, we'd be happy to do that too. So I know it's just a painful for what you guys see going on every day, right? We understand that.
Thank you both.
Okay, addressing Ronald Gleason's question about shallow wells, he asks if a person can dig a well without procuring a water right for secondary irrigation. A person can dig a well on their property if they want to, that's their property, but in order to use water, you need to have a valid water right. So digging the hole is fine, but pumping water out of that hole for a use is not fine unless there's a valid water right behind it. And then going down again in the comments, James Reese from our office, he put a link to the email notification. And I don't know, it might be beneficial just to have him or James Greer kind of just step through how that works, how to sign up, so you guys can all see how that works. I don't know, Jim or James, are you willing to do that?
Hey, Jim, I think it would be helpful. What he's talking about is that you can actually subscribe, and then any new applications that are filed in a particular area, you'll get an email notification. So Jim, are you there?
Yeah, I can do that right quick.
That would be great.
Share screen. So I sent the link, direct link, but you can see on from our homepage, if you come here to programs and water rights and notices, and then click, and then we've got this email service where you can use the link that I provided. And if you can register for an account. You can sign in, and we have basically two options. One is this first one is you can type in a water right number or a change or an exchange. You'll get a notification if something on that water right file changed. So we keep paper files for all the water rights, but we also have all the documents scanned. And so if a new document is added to a file, and you've signed up to receive notices for that file, you'd get an email that night. So those go out nightly. And then we also have this option, the new filings list point of diversion notification. And this one, you can choose, like you could choose a water right area or a point with a distance, or I can even choose a custom area. And I can choose my area. And now if if there's a new filing with a point of diversion in that area, then I'll get an email anytime that happens. And and then if you want to stop receiving the notices, you can stop them. And
so I recommend you just go in and draw a polygon around the Ogden Valley, and then you'll get notice of every new application filed. It make you feel important with all those emails you get every night. Okay, going back to the questions, there was a question asked about individual wells, and individual wells are required to be able to be measured. That could be a meter, could be just a measuring device, and that's in statute. That Chapter 73 of the Utah Code. Okay, I don't know. Jim, are you seeing that request for recorded presentation or the link? It's just going to be on our website. So, and then
let me
go ahead, Jim.
Oh, I can just kind of answer that question quickly. I can. From our homepage, if you go to meetings and past meetings, sometime in the next day, or maybe by Monday, there'll be a link, and it will a link to all the information for this meeting. You'll have the recording, the PowerPoint presentations, and that's all.
And then Teresa, we don't have a deadline as far as comments being made for this meeting because it's not like the official public meeting. So comments can just be submitted in an ongoing basis, just like you have there, Shanna.
I would suggest if you have comments, though, that you do submit them within the next 30 to 60 days. That will help us gauge, what the concerns are and what the issues are, rather than us having to, in a year from now, look at what those comments are. So I would say if you could, in the next 30 to 60 days, if you do have a comment, get that into us.
Which Ronald Gleason question? I answered a couple of them about the meters and.
Sorry, Eric, it was around the shallow well. Are people able to dig a 20-foot or 30-foot deep shallow well without a water right and irrigate out of it?
You can dig the hole, but you can't use water from the hole without a water right. I don't know why you'd want a 20-foot hole in your property without a water right.
There is, I'll share with you, Eric, this is Paul Joyce. I'll share with you that I've encountered that conversation multiple times from people. There is some hearsay that you can, and that is okay to dig a shallow well, and that it doesn't require a water right if it is less than a certain depth. and aware of many people that have done so. Not who I'm willing to salt out here, but it is kind of a thing that people talk about that is okay.
It is. It's very. Oh, sorry, Eric. I was going to say it's very interesting, Paul. I think where that misinformation comes from is you can dig your own well less than 30 feet without a well driller. And a lot of folks extend that you also don't need a water right, but that is not true. And as we do different education and presentations across the state, we clarify that issue, that you can have a shallow well and you don't need a well driller to drill that well for you. But you do need a water right in any case, just like Eric said, has explained today, that to use the water, you need a water right.
Thanks, Teresa.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Eric, do you want to put the public comment screen back up there so they can see the address and everything?
Okay, are there any more questions?
I'm not seeing any. Again, I just encourage you, please give us your contact information. Click on the link. I'll have James post it one more time for you to give us your contact information. We only have, I think, 30 folks that have done that, and that's the only way that we're going to be able to get a hold of you again. So please do that. So in summary, again, I thank the UGS for their work that they did with the study and helping us understand the system up there better. At this time, we're not looking to change the current appropriation policy, water right appropriation policy. And I'll just reiterate again that those of you, if you feel that there's a use going on without a water right, reach out to us or our enforcement engineer. There's a process you can go through to do that, for us to look at that. And I encourage you to do that to help us understand what the use of water is in this area. So with that, I thank everyone for coming. I think at one point we had over 80 people that had joined us, and there's about 50 of you that have stuck it out through to the end. And I appreciate, the knowledge that you share with us. You guys are living in the area, and you can kind of tell we don't have a whole lot of staff, but we try and get where we need to be when we need to be. But we really rely on the communities to help us understand what's happening in your areas. So if you have questions, please reach out to us. We're happy to answer any questions you have. I'm sure Lucy would be more than willing to take technical questions on this study for you following up. And thank you. We'll leave the link up for just a minute. If you guys want to take a minute to give us your contact information, we'll do that. So thank you, and have a good night, and stay safe, and have a good holiday.
Thanks everyone for your interest.
Thanks again, Lucy.
Yeah, thanks. You're welcome. It was good to talk to everyone, and yeah, please reach out. lucyjordan@utah.gov is my email address.
Okay. Okay, well, I'm going to sign off. Thank you, everyone.